Turn these folks in the north and south to war. You know we gotta work for peace. Gotta work. Gotta work. You gotta peace. Time to go to work. I don't want to sound like no late night commercial, but it's a matter of fact that there are thousands of children all over the world in Asia and Africa and in South America who need our help. When they start talking about 55 cents a day and 70 cents a day, I know a lot of folks feel as though that's not really any kind of contribution to make, but we have to give up $1.50 just to get in the subway nowadays. So this is a song about tomorrow and about how tomorrow can be better if we all, each one reach one, each one try to teach one. Nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. Everyone must play a part. Everyone got to go to work. Work for peace. Spirit say work. Work for peace. You believe in say go to work. You believe in peace, time to go to work. Can't be waving your hand no more, go to work. Everything you ever really wanted, better go to work.
Morning.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here on time, y'all. I'm going to give folks another minute or so to get here. And so I will share my screen and you guys can watch yet another groovy video.
That was good. What one was that?
I'll tell you in a minute. Hold on.
Okay.
My technical skills aren't great enough to manage people talking and sharing my screen.
Work for peace.
I'm not worried about it. It was Gil Scott Heron. All right then. Now I've got to figure this out. Give us another few minutes for people to get here. Thanks for your patience and your flexibility, and for being here on Saturday morning.
Dream, a dream that comes true.
It is an epic story, for it tells of the creation of an empire.
This is the wrong, sorry. I just saved you guys from a traumatic thing just now. If you'd heard what I was hearing, you would be really, really bummed. Yeah. Okay, correct. That's correct.
They call it a pipeline, but those on the front lines know that black snake was sent for us to grow, to shed the skin our ancestors pray, of wounds old and calloused, so that we may stay, so that we may unite, unity our tool. No weapons are found in this court of rule. Men becoming ki'ais, steadfast in their guard, protecting women's hearts as their song become roots, roots to cast out healing for all sentient beings, to honor sacred mother, heart forward we heal. The salmon will run, the mauna will breathe, the rivers will flow. The rainbow is here and prophecy tells us all generations will hear.
Stand up with the First Nations and our people that been living here for thousands of years. Stand up. We've been fighting for our freedom since the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria. Stand up. like Geronimo, Sitting Bull, Red Cloud, Crazy Horse, Leonard Peltier. Stand up. Now they poisoning the waters for our sons and our daughters, so we on the frontier. One nation, one cause, one people, one tribe. Now it's us against the pipeline. Get on your feet for Standing Rock, and we'll show you how strong we could be when we unify.
To all my native people, recognize yourself, keep your head up. To all my tribal people, recognize yourself, keep your head up. To all my native people, to all the original people, to all my indigenous people, recognize yourself, keep your head up.
We was winning this game on planet Earth. It's been spinning, we've been living and dying, but giving birth the first of many nations. Celebrating them days when all that got made came after what God made. These days we cater to these internet memes, internet streams. It seems them streams aren't clean. We need the whole story seen where hassling before water has gasoline in it. Malcolm X moment, Martin Luther King with a dream and war boning. Wounded Knee plus Alcatraz dogs on it. This is for the rock, with prayers we stand on it.
Oh yeah, we playing on it, the earth we camp on it. In a sweat lodge singing our songs with grandfathers. Heat rocks all in the spot, we splash on them with a beatbox from my boy, we jam on it. Said a prayer for the black snake killers. Praying on the front lines, they are the realest. Stand for your people, stand for your family. Stand with Standing Rock, stand for humanity. Hey.
It takes a group of people who actually care about, Mother Earth and life and water being sacred and the land being sacred to say, we stand up.
To all my native people, recognize yourself, keep your head up. To all my tribal people, recognize yourself, keep your head up. To all my native people, to all the original people, to all my indigenous people, recognize yourself, keep your head up.
Net a wapos a cat, chikatala, doggle, dogwa, the shutala, diluk, the lock, old chip tala.
Mini Wachoni, water is life.
Mini Wachoni.
Water is life.
Water is life.
Water is life.
Water is life.
I stand.
I stand with Standing Rock.
I stand with Standing Rock. I stand with Standing Rock. Stand up. Stand up.
Stand up.
Stand up.
I stand with Standing Rock. Stand up.
To all my native people, woke up the giant, we won't go quiet. To all my tribal people, don't mistake our peace as we stand defiant. To all my native people, it's the calm before the storm and I can hear it coming. To all my tribal people, I'm ready for the battle when we ain't running. Stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Standing rock, standing rock. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Stand up, stand up, stand up. Standing rock, standing rock.
Standing rock, we're standing feet as history is on a sad repeat. Is it liberty or we just acting free as our land depletes from these hands of greed? See, fate is found, how we face the hounds. Take a vow for these sacred grounds. Make a sound that'll shake them out. Say aloud, what can save us now?
What can save us now?
So that's a good start for the day. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. Welcome to our North Carolina Peace Action statewide meeting. We're together for a couple of hours, and I hope those go well for everyone. I'm George Friday. I'm the staff person. I think my title is Assistant Director of North Carolina Peace Action. And I'm happy to have been on staff for several years now, and it's a pleasure to have y'all here with us today. We'll hear from several of our state leaders who are doing different kinds of work across the state, from the mountains to the Triangle and the Triad. And we're gonna then have time to talk with each other about ideas that we have, and even hear from Peace Action's president for a little bit here later. Our day is going to start, though, hearing from Kim Porter. Kim is staff for North NC Warren. Ooh, and that reminds me, I'm going to put something in the chat while Kim is speaking. And Kim is speaking on Earth Justice. She is also co-chair of the North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, A Call for Moral Revival, the Ecological Devastation Committee. I may have that wrong. She'll let you know when she begins to speak. So, and after Kim, just to save time so you don't have to hear me talk too much, after Kim, we will hear from Ken Jones. Ken will speak both about Raytheon invading our state in the western part of the state and the military-industrial complex. And then after Ken, then we'll hear from Ashley Carrington. Ashley lives in Cary and will be talking to us about building racial unity in the state. So you're going to hear from Kim Porter, Ken Jones, and then Ashley Carrington. And y'all, when you're at 2 minutes, you're going to see me go like this. That means you got 2 minutes. And then I'll raise my hand when it's time to stop. I hope I don't have to interrupt you and cut you off, but I will if I have to. But we're now going to start with the wonderful Kim Porter. Kim?
Hey, y'all. I'm Kim Porter, as George said, and I'm happy to be here with you today as we talk about the military and I talk about the planet. And I am co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign in North Carolina, Ecological Devastation. George, you were right about that. Also on the board of the North Carolina NAACP and SARN and Community Roots. And I, as a job, what I get paid for is I am a community organizer for NC Warren, which is an environmental group. And, you know, the main thing with the Poor People's Campaign, and I'm going to focus a little bit on that, is we are fighting for equity for everybody. We really focus on anti-poverty, being anti-racist, looking at ecological devastation, healthcare for all, militarism and the military state that we're in, and the moral narrative, and how we all need to be taking care of each other and fighting against corporate greed, because we see that is at the root of a lot of the things that are going on, white supremacy and corporate greed. Nationally, 140, this is before the pandemic, these statistics that I'm going to share. 140 million people were poor and low income, 140 million just in the United States. That's before the pandemic. Over 43.5% of the population was poor and low income. That's just unacceptable. It's 60.4% of Black people, 64% of Latinos, 40% Asian, 58% Native and Indigenous folks, and 33.5% white people, Caucasians. So those numbers are off the charts, and it's ridiculous in, you know, the richest country in the world. And how we tie that in with war is with white supremacy and the fact that the United States has engaged in white supremacy from the very beginning and utilizing white supremacy to oppress other people. And what we know about the military industrial complex is that the United States is the largest producer of greenhouse gases in the world. So think about that for a moment. I mean, it just blows the mind for me to even think about that. And what we know is that war is a rich man's war, and poor people fight it. And it's often people of color and low income white people who wind up fighting in these wars, giving their lives to promote white supremacy and corporate greed. Over 500,000 people have been killed in the United States in wars in Afghanistan and Pakistan since 2001. And resources have been used to keep up the military complex instead of taking care of our people at home who need help, who need medical care, who need a living wage, quite frankly, people who don't have a home to live in or are just one emergency away, like a medical emergency or an employment emergency, from being homeless and having nowhere to live. And we know too that what the United States does is they go to other countries and they take over and sell off um, the resources from other countries. And a lot of times that's oil companies that the United States gets the oil and sells it to the companies in the US and make huge profits off of that. And also with the US military utilizing so much energy, they use about a third of the energy in North Carolina, but they use the energy and then they go to other countries and take oil to help corporations make profits. And it's a really bad cycle. And I don't want to get into the trap, like a lot of people do, of talking about how can we make the military green? Because as far as I'm concerned, we need to get rid of the military industrial complex altogether. So we could talk about how can we cut the consumption of fossil fuels with the military, but that's not the answer. That's not the answer at all. And what we know is that the US is responsible for 72%, the United States military, that is responsible for 72% of the United States government total greenhouse emissions. That was in 2016. The World Bank estimated that 75 to 80% of the cost of the rapidly escalating climate crisis to clean it up would fall upon impoverished countries, not even on the United States, which is responsible for most of the devastation. And we know that we need to fix climate change, that we need to really, it's an emergency situation, it's an urgent situation. We have basically till 2035, 2040 at the most to correct the major issues that we have with climate on our planet. The military leaves neurotoxins, heavy metals, radioactive materials, uranium in the places that they go to war in. And carbon dioxide, the emissions is just overwhelming, not only in those countries, but all over the world. And so one of the things that we can do here in North Carolina, like I said, I don't want to talk about how can we make the military green, because that's not the answer. The answer is, for the environment, is renewable energy. And we need to utilize renewable energy. And we need to get rid of the military industrial complex. I've already said that. I'm going to keep saying that because we all know that's really important. But what can we do? And George asked me to talk about what can we do specifically in North Carolina. And I can tell you that Duke Energy is responsible and provides over 90% of the energy in North Carolina. And Duke is a monopoly. It's been around for over 100 years. Duke Energy is the largest corporate utility in the United States. It's the second largest corporate utility in the world. So by having Duke Energy use more renewable energy, that is a way that we can really combat ecological devastation in not only in the United States, but in the world, with Duke being responsible for so much of it. So Duke's having an integrated resource plan coming up this coming week. It's a plan they do every 15 years. And Duke's only utilizing 4 to 5% renewable energy right now. So that third of the North Carolina's energy that's being used by the military is mostly not renewable. And we really want, and we demand that Duke Energy use renewable energy, and that they do it now. Utilizing 4 to 5% when the national average is 19.8% is just unacceptable. And Duke's calling for 14 to 15% in the next 15 years. And we need to be way beyond that. I mean, we need to be at 100% by 2035. That really is the goal. So one of the things that we can do to take action, and George is going to put this in the chat, is I'm asking for people to make comments to Duke Energy to demand that make comments to the North Carolina Utilities Commission to demand that they not accept Duke's IRP, that we reject the IRP, and that we utilize more solar, because Duke's talking about using 50 frac gas power plants in the next several years, and we don't need frac gas, we don't need coal, we need more renewable energy, and we need it now. And so if you can go on that link or go to ncwarn.org, they'll give you information about what you can do so that you can make comments. And that's just one step. Also, the Energy Justice North Carolina Coalition is fighting against the Duke monopoly, and you can sign a petition. There's information on ncwarn.org. And I wish we had more time to talk, but it's on to the next person. And thank you so much for giving me this time today. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
Well, hello, everybody. And George, you have some slides. If you would share your screen, I'm going to walk through some slides with you all about the military-industrial complex and also about our local efforts here in Asheville to resist it, a movement we are calling Reject Raytheon. Okay, so our first slide here shows something you're probably familiar with. I have a sense that I'm speaking to people who are very well versed in the military-industrial complex. So let me just review with you some of the stuff we know. You know that Eisenhower said it was the military-industrial congressional complex, and that was deleted from his speech. This graphic here is from a slideshow that Christian Sorensen put together. And at the end of my presentation, I'm going to share with you a teach-in that we're going to do with Reject Raytheon on May the 2nd that features Christian. Here you can see the triad, and you can see how money moves around from Congress to the Pentagon to the corporations and back to Congress. As you probably know, people also move in a revolving door from one to the other, not to mention influence. Okay, so let's move to the next slide, George, please. And you may know, many of you probably do know, Ray McGovern, and he coined this phrase, Mickey Mat. And his point is that it's not just military, industrial, congressional, but now the web of this power elite extends to the intelligence community, certainly to the media, the mass media, and other forms of media like Hollywood and so forth, which mold our minds, and to academia, which has so many contracts related to the Pentagon, many think tanks that are funded by, in many cases, right-wing foundations. So that's what he calls Mickey Mat. I just have on the bottom of the slide that I would also add to Ray's Mickey Mat, foreign governments which produce a demand for our weaponry. And I'm thinking of Saudi Arabia and Israel, and you can probably add countries that you know as well. And big tech, Silicon Valley certainly is walking hand in hand and making lots of money on the military-industrial complex. So, so let's move to the next slide. I'm going to move a little quickly through the first few slides because it's things I think you may know very well already. We talk about the Pentagon. As you can see on this slide, I'll give you a chance to look at it. The Pentagon budget on the right side of the slide for 2020 was $740 billion. And that's just the Pentagon budget. And as someone mentioned in the chat, Biden has actually proposed now $753 billion. But this slide shows you all the other military spendings in what we might call the national security budget. And you can see there are lots of things not in the Pentagon budget that are related to war. The one that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down, the war budget, OCO, you may know is the Overseas Contingency Fund, which was allotted right after 9/11 to the Pentagon to conduct the war in Afghanistan. And it's since become a slush fund for the Pentagon, which is renewed every year. So the Pentagon budget alone is over $2 billion a day. 1 million a minute. It's more than the defense budgets of the next 10 countries combined. And according to Code Pink, over half of that budget goes to private contractors, our war corporations, who then donate to politicians' campaigns, of course. So that's the military-industrial complex Move to the next slide. Okay, here, I know you know the out of hand spending that the US military does. This is done by David Swanson's group, World Beyond War, this graph. It's in billions. The bottom bar, he's got it pegged at 1 trillion. The previous slide showed a little more than 1 trillion. And then you can compare it to the other things on the slide. And pretty outrageous. Oh, let's move to the next slide. I think you skipped one, George. Can you go back one? George, can you go back one more? Okay, so the slide it is not showing shows that from Open Secrets, the website Open Secrets, 5 defense contractors, and you can probably name them as well as I can: Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, Boeing, there's the slide, Boeing, General Dynamics. These 5 alone contribute over $60 million to PACs and various forms of support for Congress and elected officials. So these big 5, of course, are the main perpetrators when we think of war corporations, commonly called defense contractors, largest in the world. Here in Asheville, we're struggling against Raytheon, which is now, since it merged with United Technologies, the 2nd largest in the world. Okay, next slide, George, please. Whoop, skipped over one now. Maybe they're not in the right order. Go back a little bit to the one you had previously. No, you're going forward now, go backwards.
Hey, Ken, I'm not a expert at this. I don't know really how to go forward and back.
Okay, so the left arrow, I think, will send you back the other way.
That's good. I don't see any arrows.
On your computer?
No.
No? Okay, one more.
So,
you're doing good. Go back.
Hey, wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Right.
This still counts as your time, bruh.
That's
okay, so here you are.
Okay, good. So that is another, oh, well, that's not quite the one I want, but let me tell you.
It's the one that's after the military people, contractors.
Okay, so the one that you had before that was Wall Street is the ultimate war profiteer. Let me just say a word about that. It shows, it's Christian Sorensen, his slide, and it shows many of the war profiteers beyond the big 5. Okay, so now the one that's showing. You probably know as well as I do that there are 800 US military bases around the world. And here you can see where they're located. And something to take note of is that we are engaged in what is commonly called the great power competition. We are encircling Russia and China. It's another Cold War against Russia and China. And of course, this means big bucks for the war industry because it will call for high-tech weaponry. We're already seeing arms and ships being sent to the Ukraine in a provocation against Russia, and $655 million bill right now in the Senate to send more arms to the Asian Pacific to confront China. Just saw that this morning. And that bill calls for, speaking of high-tech stuff, it calls for increased sales of long-range precision firepower, air and missile defense systems, anti-ship cruise missiles, land attack cruise missiles, conventional hypersonic systems, intelligence, surveillance, on and on. And guess who's going to make a profit on all of that? Our war corporations. One other thing about this slide that shows the military bases is what it's not showing is something that Nick Terse, who some of you may know the reporter Nick Terse, who reports for Tom Dispatch and The Nation. He reported recently that Special Operations Command deployed forces in 2020 to 154 countries. These aren't bases, these are Special Operations Forces. And that's about 80% of the world's nations. And we also know the US employs mercenaries and proxies around the world, promotes regime change through CIA covert operations, funding of local opposition groups through USAID, NED, and other channels. And of course, we know about economic sanctions. That's also warfare. And we now have economic sanctions against 30 countries at last count. Point being that here you can see the outrageous number of military bases, but our sprawl around the world is pervasive. It's much more than this. Okay, so next slide. There you go. So it used to be that the military referred to what was called full spectrum dominance. And now the term that they're using is multi-domain integration, MDI. So if you can look as close as you can at this graphic, this is another of Christian Sorensen's graphics. You can see the domains, subsurface, marine, land, going up the front of the cube, air, space, and now cyber. And the quote that Christian has there, I'll let you read it for yourselves. It names some of the high-tech stuff that is now in play for the war concept. So let's be clear too that the Department of Defense maintains 11 combat commands, things like AFRICOM in Africa, CENTCOM, Central Command, Cyber Command, 11 of these things, European Command, so forth. Each command has a geographic or a functional mission that provides command and control of military forces. And the idea with MDI is to integrate all of these commands and to put them under one of the commands, and that is the command called Strategic Command, STRATCOM. STRATCOM is located in Nebraska in Offutt Air Force Base, and it is the place that maintains nuclear weapons and prepares for nuclear warfare. And it's got new missions. It has missile defense under its domain. It's got global command and control, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, global strike, cyber warfare, electromagnetic warfare. And so STRATCOM is commonly referred to in military literature as the most dangerous organization on Earth. And maybe Offutt Air Force Base might be called the most dangerous place on Earth. Okay, so that's what we're dealing with. That's the big picture of the military industrial complex that I wanted to help us look at. And if we can go to the next slide, what I'll do is now talk about North Carolina in particular. Here's a map that comes from the Military and Veterans Affairs. Maybe many of you are familiar with it. You can see the text under the map is from the Military and Veterans Affairs. Let you read that on your own. You may know that North Carolina alone has 8 military bases. I looked up recently defense contractors, how many defense contractors, large and small, are getting funds from the military industrial complex, and it lists 8,000 in North Carolina, 8,000 defense contractors in North Carolina. We know that Fort Bragg is the home of the Army's Airborne Corps and its headquarters of the Special Operations Command. And we also know that Governor Cooper proudly proclaims that we are the most military-friendly state in the nation. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. And here, I want to spend a little time helping you see what we're doing in Asheville. And Pratt & Whitney is the division of Raytheon that is coming to Asheville. And I want to present what's going on here as a case study of how the military industrial complex invades our communities all over the country. So some of you I know on this call are from Asheville and are part of our Reject Raytheon group and our Veterans for Peace group. And you know the information that Pratt & Whitney came here as part of a secret deal. And the deal was in the making a year and a half before anybody knew about it. We found out about it in November of just this past year. And it was a secret deal between Raytheon And the public officials at the state level and the local level, our Buncombe County commissioners gave them a $27 million tax incentive system agreement to come here. And the business community, the Chamber of Commerce here and at the state level, I'm sure, were instrumental in facilitating the deal. So one of the things the military industrial complex does is work in secret so that you don't even know it's going until lots of the things have been signed and sealed and delivered. Also, in our case, there's the hidden influence of big money. I'm calling it the local gentry because in our case, it's built more farms that gave 100 acres of land to Pratt & Whitney free, or I think it was maybe $1 or something like that per acre. So that they stripped away the forest. If you see pictures of it, it looks like mountaintop removal so that they can build this 1.2 million square foot plant up there. What they're going to do is make components for jet engines that go into commercial, but also military aircraft, in particular the F-35, the killer weapon, state-of-the-art killer weapon. So the military industrial complex always promises jobs. And, you know, it's no mistake that there are no jobs in our neoliberal economy. You know, it's by design that the money is all going to the Pentagon and the jobs are in the military industrial complex. So if, you know, if they come along and say, hey, we've got jobs, in our case, they say we have 800 jobs, you know, people jump at it. The local commissioners jump at it. I had somebody on the street last night when we were doing an action out in the street yell at me that, what, you don't want jobs? So that's the currency, and that's how people get won over to say, yes, we want this plant in our community. And I'm calling the next point of military industrial complex strategies extortion, because what they do, they play off the likes of an Asheville against other locations, other places, other cities and towns, and they extort people for these tax agreements that Asheville gave them or Buncombe County gave them, land that we gave them, infrastructure agreements. They make sure that they don't have unionized labor. In fact, one of the reasons they're moving to Asheville, they are just laid off a bunch of unionized labor people in Connecticut where they have a plant, moving here to where we are a right to work state, as you well know. And they also got, in our case, an agreement to do worker training with AB Tech. So they've extorted all these concessions as if they need it, right? Another point is they certainly turn a blind eye and in fact encourage people not to look at local concerns. And in our case, it's there was a promise from the city and the county to do reparations funding for the African-American community here. And of course, that's money, that's $27 million tax agreement is money not going to reparation funding. And, you know, they don't want to discuss the potential environmental damage, and very likely they, you know, Raytheon has over 90 lawsuits around the country that they have yet to settle, or maybe some of them are settled because of environmental damage. And there are lots of traffic concerns with this new plant as well. And they externalize, military industrial complex doesn't want to talk about the effects of war and climate emergency. You know, no discussion about Yemen, for example, how the F-35s and other aircraft are being sold. Well, the F-35s are potentially being sold to Saudi Arabia, but other aircraft, F-15s and F-16s, are being sold to Saudi Arabia, used in Yemen. People don't want to talk about the effects of this industry. And you don't hear that conversation. They externalize it. It's like somewhere else. Same with climate emergency. You don't hear that discussion either. And of course, the last thing is media cheerleading. And our local newspaper, of course, is all gung-ho about, you know, here come all these jobs. And look, they're going to invest money in the community, all this. So that, if you look at all these together, is a pretty powerful thing. The military industrial complex, in our case, Raytheon in particular, has really learned how to do this. And they're powerful and hard to confront, but we're doing it. We're stepping up anyway. And if you stick to go to the next slide, George, this will be my last slide. So our organization, as I mentioned, is called Reject Raytheon. We came together serendipitously, actually, by protesting against, once we found out in November, we showed up as the commissioners, all independently from different organizations, commissioners meeting to protest, and found each other. It's Veterans for Peace, it's DSA, it's PSL, and Sunrise Movement. We have young and old. We're excited about our coalition. We have street actions every couple of weeks. We get 20 to 30 people that show up for them. So we have lots of stuff on the media. There you can see our website, our Facebook, our Twitter, Instagram, so forth. And lastly, I want to plug the teach-in that we're going to have with Christian Sorensen. There's a registration link there. And this guy is an expert about this. I highly recommend his book, Understanding the War Industry. If you can come to that, you'll learn more than you probably already know about the way this nasty system works. Okay, that's it for me. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Carrington. I am here representing Fed Up and Rise Up and NCPPC. Just quickly, if you're not familiar with Fed Up, we are a coalition or a union. We are not a charity organization. Comprised of Carolina Jews for Justice, North Carolina Poor People's Campaign, and NC Race Up. We distribute food boxes in Durham at the Lakewood Shopping Center, as well as do canvassing for the community. We follow up with community members who receive food. And we also do a political education call where we've actually been examining the 14 points as a part of the Jubilee platform for the Poor People's Campaign. And our next political call is actually on April 14th. I will drop that link for registration in the chat in a few so that everybody can come join us. It's going to be really fun. But these organizations were, started out of necessity. So when George asked me to speak about racial unity, I had mixed feelings because you guys are NC Peace Action, and my experience as a woman of color has been a fight. So it's kind of weird to be asked to come speak to a peace group about something that is actually very violent. I do think that there is a road to racial equality. I am pushing for equity, but the bigger thing that I think racial unity is going to take is cleaning up some mess that happened, acknowledging that, and making a plan to move forward. And so I call it HRAA, which is History, Reality, Advocacy, and Action. Everything always ends with an action. But the brunt of racial unity is not on people of color. So I'm not going to be speaking to you about how my experience as a person of color is your job, or somehow we together are going to make this plan. No, to break it down very simply, the racial issue was started by white people. It is going to have to be ended by white people. Full stop. We are here as, let me speak for myself. I am here as someone willing to have the conversation about what needs to occur for us to be a unified humanity. The great trick is thinking, we have to fight each other when everyone is suffering, as we've seen. COVID hit and decimated everyone's life. And so white supremacy and racism negatively affects everyone. We've been conditioned to think that it doesn't, and that white people don't have a responsibility in correcting that, which is incorrect. The history of racial unity, as you all know, is steeped in blood. It's steeped in bondage and trading humans as currency, trafficking, which still continues today. So that's a whole other thing. We won't go into that. But this whole premise of going to an end destination, I don't agree with, because where are we going? There isn't some great land we're all going to end up with where everybody has all their needs met. That's not how this works. We're looking to come together and understand that our differences and the experiences that we have were not caused by people of color. We are reactive, often based on what has been presented to us over time. So as white people, what can you do in order to come together and at least come to the table? I find it's often very challenging to talk to white people about racial issues because they often feel like they don't have a personal responsibility. I'm not racist. I have some Black friends. I do this, I do that. Awesome. However, the work doesn't stop there. And that's not even the full scope of what the work is. So I would say acknowledge the 4 W's. And Ellen just popped in and said that we've never really had racial unity in this country. And you're correct, we have not. We've had racial subjugation. We still have racial subjugation, but we've never had true unity. And that's heartbreaking for me as someone who's a hopeless romantic. And I don't want everyone to get along, but everything should be calm and peaceful and tranquil. And we don't need a lot of rigmarole. But we as a country and as people have never exemplified unity, have never exemplified equity, and continue to find ways, which we see through our legal system, to keep institutional and structural racism thriving for people in power. And let's be real, racism makes money for specific people. It does not make money for everyone. But let me get back to the W's. So acknowledging the 4 W's is a step on the road. Acknowledging white supremacy, white fragility, white identity, and white privilege. All of these things exist. I'm not going to go into a whole thing about them. This is where you get to take an assignment and do your own research. But acknowledging all of these things, digging into your own personal biases and prejudices, and understanding how to adjust and become a different version, a better version of yourself, leaving those thoughts and those actions behind. That is the work that comes with building racial unity. It is a very personal journey. It is something that you're going to have to examine, whether you clutched your purse when you saw a person of color walking by, whether you think I'm a well-spoken Black woman just because I'm not speaking African-American vernacular to you guys. Those are racist and very damaging things that we've internalized. And I say we because if you've been educated in America, racism touched your soul, Black, white, or other. That's just the way it is. Those things have been internalized, and it's almost a knee-jerk reaction that you don't realize are actual racist behaviors, and they are subtle racist behaviors, so it doesn't seem like it's bad, but it is dehumanizing. And it puts people of color in a position of always having to defend themselves, but being seen as hostile or aggressive or emotional or passionate, which we all have been at some point in our lives, except people of color often bear the brunt and the negativity, the negative connotations that are associated with all of those things. So again, and I will drop the 4 W's, how else to help? Interrogate your own whiteness. Interrogate what within your life gives you privilege besides your skin color. What in your life makes it easier for you, whereas someone like me would not have that same ability? Listen, 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 listen. When a person of color is telling you their experience, they are sharing with you a very traumatizing, dehumanizing, deep, and hurtful part of them. Honor that. Listen to that. Understand that just because it is not your experience does not mean it is any less valid, and that who is sharing it with you, they are trusting you, which is challenging as a person of color to trust white people. But they are trusting you because you asked, because you engaged in that dialogue. It opens the door. Maybe this person is different. Maybe they do want to listen, instead of excusing, giving definitions of what things really are and what they mean. Whataboutism, all of those things negatively impact people of color because all you had to do is just listen. And then you're in the situation again where voices of color are being silenced. Number 3, and I've mentioned it before, but examine prejudices. Examine the things that you yourself do, your friend group, your family. We've all got a family member who is a little, okay? But I've found in my relationships with white people, there's a lot of subtle racism throughout families that does not get acknowledged and does not get taken care of and addressed in a way that it's not perpetuated. Because what people don't realize is the kids are hearing that. The kids you think are off playing, your grandchildren, your nieces and nephews, who you think are on their phone the whole time, they're listening to every single thing you're saying. They're listening to every conversation you're having, and they are internalizing these subtle microaggressions, these subtle hateful actions and words, and they're not realizing the severity of it based on the circumstances around them. That's my family member. They're not going to say or do anything bad. They must be right. Which then, again, silences the voice of people of color, because perception is very strong. And when we walk out into the world with negative or incorrect perceptions, we create an atmosphere that is very violent. Violence comes in numerous forms, not just physical. And I think it is important for people to understand moving towards unity, moving towards equity, moving towards understanding takes more work on the side of white people than it does people of color, because we didn't do this, okay? My ancestors popped up here, so that's why I'm here. But the circumstances of structural racism, of individual racism, of interpersonal racism, of institutional racism, these things were all created. As we all know, or if you may not, race is not an actual biological thing. That doesn't exist. Race is a social construct that was simply created to discern white people from everybody else. And throughout history and our lives, we have let that seep into government, our day-to-day lives, our communities, and our own hearts and minds. So in summation, what do? We study the history. We make sure we're studying correct history of actual people who existed, and not, if you would believe, there are fabricated histories for African Americans that they have put in textbooks. Study correct history. Examine your own reality. Examine your own prejudices. Examine what part of you may not look so great, but that's the deep shadow work that has to be done. Okay? Advocate for those who don't have a voice, because especially in the climate of our country right now, we need white advocates to stand with us, not in front, but beside and behind, so that we can move the motion forward and take action. Join groups like Fed Up. North Carolina Peace Action is awesome, but we're doing work on the ground that could definitely use allies, white allies. Join Fed Up, join Rise Up, Carolina's Youth for Justice, the Poor People's Campaign. We need everyone in solidarity. We need everyone to do the work, but it is not the responsibility of people of color to organize that. We're here working. We'd love to see you with us. And that's all for me. Thank you, guys.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Ashley. Wow, that's been great to hear from our 3 North Carolinians about what's happening and what we might be able to do across the state. It's a lot to digest. We're going to have a break in a bit, and then before we go to break, we're going to pose questions. But if you think you might forget your question, you might want to put it in the chat or write it down somewhere, because after these comments we're about to hear, we're going to hear our questions for folks. I think maybe Kim has to leave before we get to put all the questions out. Other than that, note your questions. So now we're going to hear from Kevin Martin. Kevin is the president of Peace Action and one of the few people on the planet I've known my entire professional career in peace work. To have known somebody for 40 years, that's pretty remarkable. I mean, you get old enough, it all adds up. But I've had more fun with this human in the word of peace and, in efforts for peace than I can imagine. And also know someone who makes you believe we can get there. My friend, colleague, revered human, and president of Peace Action, Kevin Martin.
Thank you so much, George. right back at you, everything you just said. I revere and love you as well. And I'm remembering the last time we were together in person in North Carolina, we've seen each other since then, was our little Undespair the People speaking tour that we did together in the South right before Trump was inaugurated. So at least we have somewhat better conditions now than we did then, but only because people make it so. And I think one of the things that all of you should be able to take with you and probably do every day is that the politicians don't make good things happen out of the goodness of their heart or their wisdom or whatever. I mean, a lot of them are very good people. I'm not slagging off all politicians. But any good things that Joe Biden has done, for example, since he became president, was because of people working very hard on these issues for a long time. I'm going to try to be very brief and give an overview and a few concrete actions that you can take right away. And if it makes sense in the future sometime for me or another member of our national staff to come on with you and get more into the nitty gritty of strategy around our agenda, we can certainly do that. But for today, I'm not going to even attempt to go very deep because there's just too much and your time is short and you're covering an impressive amount of ground in your meeting today. So what I put in the chat is the list of Peace Action's priority issue campaigns: ending the endless wars, which includes Yemen, supporting diplomacy with Iran, and I'll come back at the end to actions on both of those. Also removing US military action from Syria and Afghanistan. And it's not just troops, but also any type of military actions. The Pentagon budget, people over the Pentagon. You may have just seen yesterday the initial proposal is for the Pentagon budget to about stay flat or have a slight increase. That's totally unacceptable. We need large cuts in the Pentagon so that we can put people and the planet first. And of course, nuclear disarmament. There's a lot of different issues under that. And of course, we've been working on that issue since 1957. So either we're very inept or very persistent, or both, I suppose, in terms of working for nuclear disarmament since then. But of course, I'm being flippant. It's important, and I think about this every single day, Martin Luther King's triple evils, which of course have been taken up by the Poor People's Campaign, of racism, militarism, and economic exploitation, how they are interlocked and how they really strangle our society. And of course, the impact on the planet, which King talked about as well, and Poor People's Campaign, is elevating even more. Then you see our second tier priority campaigns: diplomacy regarding peace in Korea, transforming US sanctions policy, which relates to a lot of different issues. Really, sanctions are often war by another name. Our peace voter campaign, where we do support candidates. We're one of the relatively few peace groups that does. And we've had a real emphasis the last few election cycles on women and people of color candidates. We've helped a number of them get elected both to the House and the Senate. We really do need more peace and justice champions in Congress to be able to do our work. Opposing police militarization and police violence, rooting out white supremacy. Obviously, that's a huge one. You can call that defund the police, and you can also put that, and some of our affiliates do, together with defunding the Pentagon and promoting peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. Now, even just going through that list is kind of exhausting to me, and it might be to you as well. But that's basically our membership and our grassroots supporters want us to be engaged on all of those issues, and so we will certainly do the best we can, and we do that with our affiliates and chapters and associate groups and members all around the country. So I want to mention a few things that are upcoming. In mid-June, we're going to have our lobby days. It'll be virtual again this year, so all of you can participate. We had, I think, more participation last year. There are some disadvantages to doing congressional lobby visits by Zoom, but we had increased participation. I think we had 150 people or something like that. So we're hoping for even more. Those dates will be June 15th to 17th, or when we're going to do the issue briefings and trainings, and then the lobby visits with members of Congress and their staff will be right after that. So we'll have to pick between these because we're not going to go in and lobby on 9 different issues, right? So we're opportunistic as to which issues at what particular time might be more beneficial to us or that we might be able to have more of an impact on. So I couldn't tell you right now in June necessarily what all of our asks will be. Last year, we ended up spending a fair amount on economic sanctions and on police militarization, just because of what was going on in the world at the time. But I would like all of you to be able to join us if we can. And again, if it makes sense, I could come back for a different meeting where we could get more into the strategy and tactics on some of these different issues. But one of the things that I think about a lot, especially if we're going to Congress or however we are pressuring corporations or the media or whoever, is Frederick Douglass's dictum that power yields nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. Now, on the one hand, you might think it's depressing that human nature hasn't changed that much. We haven't evolved much as a society. In some ways, we may have devolved since he said that. But I do think that imposes a realism on our work, that we can't just be right. We can't just be caring, we can't just be just. We are all of those things, but we have to have more political muscle behind our demands. And at the same time, and I'm glad George mentioned that we've had a lot of fun together in doing this work, as well as a lot of hard work together. Emma Goldman's statement that if I can't dance, I don't want to be part of your revolution. This should be fun. Working for peace and social justice is extremely hard work, but we should celebrate ourselves, each other, and the victories that we have along the way, because they're often hard. And the other saying I like in that mode, to try to sort of be assumptive and maybe switch the power dynamic a little bit. David Crosby, who in some ways is a lot of ways is a very interesting character. One of his great songs is called What Are Their Names? And he basically is talking about the war machine and the war profiteers. And at the end, he says, peace is not an awful lot to ask. And I think we should have that attitude when we're talking to the media, members of Congress, corporations, friends, neighbors, whoever. Peace is not some, airy-fairy, impossible thing to achieve. Peace should be the norm. Peace and social justice is the only way to have a decent society worthy of the name. So we really should have that confidence, that assumption that peace indeed is not an awful lot to ask. Speaking of asks, 3 things I want you to think about doing very quickly in the near term. As a matter of fact, maybe take the day off tomorrow, but Monday, get back at it. We need support for ending all US support for the war in Yemen. So Biden made a pretty good announcement. It was a good announcement saying that we are going to stop offensive military support for Saudi Arabia and UAE for the horrible war in Yemen. But there is still the Saudi blockade of the major port in Yemen, and millions of people are at risk of starvation once again. That's intolerable, that's unacceptable. The United States should not be supporting any actions at all for that blockade. So we need you to contact your members of Congress and tell them that the United States needs to end every last bit of support, whether it's military aid, weapons, or support in terms of intelligence, which they have cut back on, any kind of support for the Saudi blockade and the Saudi-led war in Yemen. That's number 1. Number 2 is your members of Congress need to hear from you that we support getting back into the Iran anti-nuclear deal, signed, of course, by Obama and Biden, abrogated, violated by Trump. And right now, the United States is in some negotiations, but they need to get this done. It should have been a layup. It should have been done within the first day or 2 of the Biden administration. We need to get the United States back into the Iran anti-nuclear deal with the other countries. It's not just bilateral between Iran and the United States. There are the P5+1, the UN, the IAEA helps to monitor that. So we need to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. It looks like we're doing the right thing in terms of negotiations, but they haven't done it yet. And until they have, members of Congress and the administration need to understand that, again, peace is not an awful lot to ask. Diplomacy is the only answer. War is not an option. And the last thing, and I'll put this in the chat as well, is on Monday, we're having a Meet the Candidates webinar. We've done several of these with progressive candidates that we have supported for Congress. A terrific woman by the name of Karen Carter Peterson, who's running in the 2nd district in Louisiana. This includes The district is partly New Orleans and the surrounding area. We're doing I don't know why the chat's not working for me right now. We're doing a webinar with her Monday evening at 8 o'clock Eastern time. I don't know if this link is going to work. If not, we can see about getting it out to you in other ways. George will have it, and others, Joe, probably others will have it as well. A terrific candidate, African-American woman, progressive, running to take over a special election. Cedric Richmond went into the Biden administration, so they need to fill his seat. So she's a terrific candidate that we want to get more support for and help her get elected and be another peace and justice champion. And we all encourage you to do that. Thank you so much for all the great work you're doing in North Carolina. I'm very impressed at everything you do. Glad to be with you here today, and keep on peace and justice mongering.
Great, thanks. All right, y'all. So we're going to take a break in a bit, but first, if somebody wants to ask any questions, not that you put in the chat, but if you have in person, my request at break time, if any NC Peace Action board members can hang out and help me check out the questions so that when people come back from break, we can get some answers to those questions from our folks. That would be great. So do you want to raise your hand or say stack if you need to pose a question speaking and not in the chat? We've only got about 3 minutes for this, and just to hear the questions. We can't answer them now and stay on our schedule, which apparently is important to me. So there. I don't see any hands. Anyone have stacks? Make sure. Well, thanks y'all for putting your questions in the chat. So now you get to be on break until until about 11:20. Okay, that's about 10 minutes. It's a little more than 10-minute break, everyone. So please get up, stretch your legs, get a cup of tea, all that good stuff. And if you're on the board and you can hang out so that we can make sure everybody's questions get addressed, please do that with me. If not, I'll do it on my own. It's okay. But I will leave you or encourage you to take your break by listening to a little bit of Stevie Wonder. Nope, maybe. That's the wrong buttons. Oh, there we go. There, it's right. Okay, very good.
Keep on preaching.
for our virtual meeting. And we're gonna present it to you and
Keep on loving. Believers, keep on believing. Sleepers, just fall sleeping. It won't be too long. I'm so glad that I try again. It's my last time on earth I let the whole world sing. I'm so glad that I know that I know that I'm gonna keep on trying till I reach my highest ground. Till I reach my highest ground. No one's gonna bring me down. Oh no. Till I reach my highest
and then I had a lovely conversation.
Hey y'all. I see Joe and Rachel, Ellen. So y'all, I have a hard time reading chat myself to catch the questions.
Hi, Carol. I bring you
Wait a minute.
chapter DJ.
So if we can try to make sure we go back through the chat and find people's questions, we've got about 5 minutes, and then we can try to figure out who can answer the questions. So has anybody done that already? And they can say, what I've done when I can successfully do it is I copy and paste the question into a Word document so that I've got it, since I have a hard time scrolling through the chat. I just can't make heads or tails of it. Sandy?
Okay, George, there's an interesting comment from Laura Gibney about Code Peak's Tuesday evening's actions.
And that's a comment, not a question?
Well, it is a question. She says, are we participating in Code Pink's regular Tuesday evening actions?
Okay. Okay, so that's one that we can do when people come back. Any others?
That's Laura Gibney, if anyone has questions.
Laura Gibney, okay.
I put a question in the chat. It bothers me that China is and the question is, how does China, being a competitor, how do we reconcile that with their investment in our country and our investment in them? I mean, how is China perceived as a competitor militarily when they're so heavily invested in the US and we're invested in them as well?
Okay, Joe. Do you know who you would ask to respond to that question?
Ken would be the one.
Ken, okay. So Sandy's got one that from Laura, which is a pretty quick question to respond to. Yours, Joe, will take at least a couple minutes.
I think
and
Ken
the
has
latest
stepped off the
show by
call.
John Oliver also talk about that. But he was talking about
George?
debt in China. Yes,
George,
Sandy?
here's another question from Melody Shank. She said, how do the speakers envision creating power through collaboration between existing organizations?
That's an excellent question.
Take a walk with
Also, we'll take a couple minutes to
Get some
respond to.
healing.
Well, Chris Berg wants to know how we, if we do anything at the North Carolina legislature as opposed to the US. I mean, we do a lot of advocating through the US, but what do we do regarding our legislators at the state level?
Okay. So right now I've got 5 questions and we've got 4 minutes to be ready for folks.
Is it
I would
possible for
like to
any of our
ask a
speakers
question.
Rachel was asking if it's possible for any of our speakers to do what, Rachel?
to answer some of these questions?
It is. It means that we give up our small group breakout discussions. We can do
That's
one or the other
okay.
in depth. 5 questions we can't answer in 5 minutes. 5 questions can be answered in 12 to 20 minutes, which is all that we will have when we come back together.
Of course, it also wants to know if we have regular meetings via Zoom.
That's an easy one to answer, just like the Tuesday
Thank
Code
you
Pink
for
meeting.
everything that you're doing, my friend.
So, yes, Rachel?
George, I would like to ask if Ken Jones could tell us how we in the rest of the state can help Asheville and the Raytheon.
Okay. I'm gonna ask that the questions that Ken are last. I heard with that one, that's 6 questions. I'm gonna do that so that he has enough time at the end, because those questions are gonna take the longest. We've got the Code Pink question about Tuesday. Do we meet regularly? Do we work at the legislature level? What may be going on with our relationship with China and Raytheon? That's only 5, so I'm missing one. Help me remember what I'm missing.
You got 2 minutes to cover there, George. You got to trim it down. And Ken Jones has stepped off the call, so he's not going to be available.
Well, someone maybe can help answer those questions.
Well, he could be on break, which we told people to go on break.
Yeah, but usually their little thing stays here even when they're gone. All right, y'all, we've got 1 minute left, and we'll just have, we will not necessarily meet in small groups. We are a small group to start with, not super small, but 25. And we officially begin. Turn on your camera even briefly if you're back, just so I know who's back and who's still on break. Thank you so much for being cooperative, humans. It's a great thing when people are cooperative. It's lovely to see your faces even briefly. So everybody may not be back at this point. I saw that, and thanks for the thumbs up, Cindy. I saw that in Dabney has a direct question for Kevin. So just in case you need to split, Kevin, let's start with that. And we're gonna deal with all the other questions people have before the quarter to the hour. So do you want to ask your question, M. Dabney? You're muted if you do. I'll look in the chat to see if there's something for me to read. Nope. Yep. You gotta own it. You gotta take off your muteness. I can't unmute you myself. Well, we'll cover another that won't take long. One question, Sandy, about Tuesday, Code Pink. I think Laura Gibney. Laura Gibney, talk to us about Tuesday in Code Pink. Hour-long meetings.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So we just meet every Tuesday for an hour. It's an easy thing to do. They're often really great speakers like Barbara Lee from California, the representative, and people like Trita Parsi, all these kinds of people who are great. We had, anyway, a lot of people. And so it's a very short meeting. There are usually about 3 to 4 speakers speaking for a succinct period of time. And then we take action for about 10 minutes, writing messages and calling. And we have a sort of a script that we can, modify as we wish. And so it's great. It's a concrete thing to do. So one thing I often find in groups is I'm dissatisfied because I can't feel I'm doing anything really tangible, but that's at least one thing we do once a week.
Fantastic. It's like Tuesdays with Tillis, which is something you can do regularly.
Yeah, right.
Thanks for that. If you've got a link to anything I can send out to everyone, put it in the chat or email it to info.ncpeace@gmail.com and I'll get it around to people. I see that the question for Kevin was in the chat. Kevin, did you read it or would you like me to?
Yes, I did see that. How can we influence U.S. Senate primaries in favor of peace and social justice issues? Will Peace Action provide voter education materials for these primaries? Yes, we do. And that's part of what we call our Peace Voter campaign. And sometimes we actually endorse candidates. Other times we don't. We can do nonpartisan voter education, voter comparison. We do candidate questionnaires. We can do Zoom meetings with candidates. We can do briefings for candidates that are sometimes, those are briefings for candidates are usually private, but we can also do public candidate forums, et cetera. So yes, we can and do all of those things. I know we're already getting started on what to do about the Senate race in Pennsylvania. That's going to be a big one. We're working on some House special elections. I mentioned Karen Carter Peterson, also Nina Turner, who a lot of people know because she was so instrumental as the chairperson of Bernie Sanders' campaign. She's running in the House. That's not until later this year. I'm sure I think we may have already endorsed her, and we're going to do a Meet the Candidates briefing with her as well. So yes, we do all of those things, and we're always eager and willing to work with affiliates. And I know some of our affiliates don't endorse for either tax reasons or political reasons, but national can still endorse if we choose to endorse. But again, we can also do nonpartisan.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. I'm trying to read a question someone has. It's a lot though, and I can only see the end of it. Oh, I can tell that Vicky Ryder wrote it. If you need Kevin to answer to that, Vicky, let's say it now. Otherwise, let's get to some of the other questions that were in the chat before the break.
It can wait, George, until after the other questions are answered, but my question basically has to do with what good it does to go to Congress when the only people who get elected are supported by the corporations and their parties, and how we get candidates who actually represent us to be viable candidates. I'm working for ranked choice voting to see that happen here in North Carolina, and I'm hoping that others will join that fight, because without a workable Congress, we're not going to move it very quickly in the direction we want to go.
You're right. People power still can move things though. Sandy, there's another question you brought up before that we haven't covered yet. Do you remember? Right now, I think we've covered was there another meeting question?
My question was, how can we help the Asheville folks? How can those of us in the other part of the state help the Asheville folks?
Right now, the only Asheville person I recognize besides Rachel on the call is Ellen Thomas. Roger might know something about what's going on. Is there someone on the call who can speak to, oh, Ken Jones is still here.
Ken is on, and Chris Berg too.
Oh,
Chris
good.
Berg.
So raise your hand if you can tell us how to deal with Raytheon.
I can
All right,
help with
Ken
that.
Jones. Yeah, you're good. Go ahead, Ken.
So go to our website or any of our social media, and first of all, get informed about what we're doing. We're out in the streets. We're doing, marches and die-ins and banner drops, all that stuff. If you don't live here, you can't do that, but you can participate in conversations. And you can also, we're going to have a fundraiser before too long. You can join if you go to our website and you get emails from us. At some point, we got a Venmo account, so we'll need a little money to work with. But for now, just, join us on the website and, see what we're doing.
We could also stand some legal advice. If anybody knows of good attorneys in North Carolina or good environmental attorneys, that would be great. We need letters to the editors, such as the Charlotte paper, Raleigh, all throughout the state, because the state Chamber of Commerce was instrumental in getting Pratt and Whitney here. So it's really been a state effort to get them here. And so we need to have a state effort to get them out and to let them know that they're just not welcome here.
May I add?
Go ahead, Roger.
reveals how the corporate recruitment and subsidy practices in state policy are rigged to support fossil fuels in the military industrial complex. It's basically a transfer of our tax dollars to support these industries. And so I don't think we're there with a policy proposal at the state level, but I really hope that I see a convergence with the call across the board and North Carolina Warren's work to have green infrastructure where, yeah, so let's connect the dots.
Yes, a gas pipeline will be crossing the French Broad River, one of the oldest rivers in the world, 3 times because of this construction on the Biltmore farms. Also, I would suggest writing letters to Biltmore State to let them know what a bad mark this is leaving on the Vanderbilt and the Biltmore name.
It may make sense for us to have a meeting similar to the one today, just focused on the military industrial complex in the state and strategies to deal with them, expose them and remove them. Because I don't want to, this is a very significant and important conversation. Chris Berg gives a thumbs up to us having a meeting just about that. And we can't dig as deep as we'd like today. So I want to recognize Joe, and I know Chris had a question. Joe, you have your hand up now. You may also remember that we have to come to the China question. So yours and Chris's questions will be our last 2 to take. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, this regards the city council or the group in Asheville that approved this. Do you have minutes of that meeting when that was done so that you can say that to the public? Ken raised his hand.
No, I think he was reaching for some.
Oh, okay.
But answer that. Do you know, Ken? Can you prove those are secret behind the doors negotiations?
It's in an article. The best place to see it is in a reporting done in a Hendersonville paper called The Lightning. I can send that link to you, Joe, or anyone.
But it would be good if we could get the minutes from that meeting where they listened to 31 of us comment, and all of the 31, 30 of us were against. And then how there was such a short conversation after the comments that showed they already had their minds made up.
No surprise there. All right. Thanks for putting the link to that article from Hendersonville in the chat, if you can, Ken. Chris?
Yeah, I was thinking back to when I believe Peace Action helped out with the organizing of hearings on the North Carolina Torture Flights Commission. What's a good way for Peace Action, if it has an agenda on our state legislature, that'd be worth knowing? Or how do we keep tabs on issues like you say there's this North Carolina Military Commission, and might be worth keeping up with it? Thank you.
Thanks very much. If anyone has ideas or resources in response to Chris there, please put those in the chat and I can email it to everybody from today's meeting. Joe, do you want to pose your question?
Yeah, I have wondered why China is viewed as a competitor when they are so heavily invested in the United States, and we're invested in China.
You doing it, Ken?
Industry.
And I think that question is for Kevin and or Ken.
Well, I think that's a very good question. I went to China in 2008. It was just before the Beijing Olympics, and it was one of the highlights of my life. And certainly China has problems with human rights and the environment and labor and all that, but so do we. And I think it's possible for the United States to raise those concerns, but we are, so integrated economically, and you can say what's good and bad about that. But there's absolutely no interest on the people of the United States or the people of China to have some sort of new Cold War that might risk becoming a hot war. The military industrial complex looks around and they see that China is the only possible competitor that could really justify its existence. So there is sort of a vested interest. And sort of an interesting way to look at this, and I don't recommend you spend a lot of time on this, but the interim national security strategy that was put out by the Biden administration a couple of weeks ago, a lot of it is sort of to mollify people that, hey, we're not Trump and we believe in diplomacy and international organizations and we're going to be a responsible actor in the world, blah, blah. So, but a lot of it reads like sort of imperialism light, or trying to reassure the foreign policy elite that we're going back to the status quo ante before Trump. But there's a lot throughout that is about China as a competitor, China as a risk, China as trying to take over the Asia Pacific region, blah, blah. And yet there are a few parts that say, but, we're open to peacefully resolving our challenges with China. So I think Joe is asking exactly the right question that we all need to be asking. And it's not in the interest of the people of China or the United States or the world or the region for the US and China to get locked into some kind of new Cold War, which, even if we don't want war, could stumble into a hot war. There's a lot going on in the region right now militarily that's very dangerous, that could erupt into a war even if people don't want it to. So we have to call that out. And you're exactly right. When there is so much economic integration for good or bad, it just doesn't make sense at all for us to be risking a war with China.
Thank you.
With that, I need to go. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day. All righty. So recommendations based on our conversation today and the discussion that we've had. Are there any recommendations for North Carolina Peace Action as an organization, any part of the state, the whole state? You can raise your hand or say stack.
Stack.
Okay. I think Ann and Roger. Part of what helps is a little light comes on around your screen when you talk.
Or get a halo.
I know what part of where my eye caught. This eye is blind. Roger, you're on this side. So if you were first, I apologize. But right now I've got Ann, Roger, and Ellen. Ann, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here. I didn't know you were calling on me. You're waiting for others?
Did you say stack?
Yes.
Very good. Please, go ahead.
Okay. Two things. I think we should do more of these meetings. We can figure out a better time, but maybe more focus and shorter, but figure out what actions we can take by the end of them. And I think we need to figure out a way so we communicate better. If we know what's going on in Asheville, it doesn't take 3 minutes to send an email in support. So I think we're going to have to figure out, how do we function as a state organization?
Hey, I do appreciate that the Peace Action did send a letter to our county commission as one of the, it was a written comment. So that'd make 32 comments. But yeah, I do appreciate that you guys did send a letter on your own behalf to the commission.
Great, thanks. Roger?
So the voter, I think that there's a lot of power when we can exert it locally and when we can influence candidates to to take positions on our issues, and Peace Action has a long history of that, going back to the nuclear freeze work. Kevin's no longer here, but I think that as far as lessons learned from Asheville or future directions we might go, I think that there is a convergence of interests in sort of stopping the runaway development of big corporate military industrial corporations, you know, coming in. That stirs a lot of people up at the local level. And so what I'm hoping may come together, or I could sort of imagine coming together, is Peace Action being sort of a senior or more experienced partner along. I mean, there are groups like Sunrise and stuff who have been doing canvas outreach like Peace Action used to do. But I think if we combined that with voter education and a new crop of candidates at the municipal level who would like to change things from so that we can implement green development in our communities, and which necessitates change at the state and federal levels. This will help us to begin, even if we don't win a lot of policy change, and initially we can be grooming candidates and be developing this sort of unified front that is good at doing voter education and mobilization, and to begin grooming and building our capacity to move candidates from the municipal level all the way up. So the way I see that, doing that, is not like just one organization, but like a lot of organizations coordinating their grassroots mobilization and voter ID efforts in conjunction with their issue campaigns that overlap, and then kind of sharing their databases, which Peace Action also pioneered, I remember, with the list sharing when Bridget Burge was working on that piece with that project. So.
Thanks a lot, Roger. Ellen?
We did.
You might be muted, but you hand your hand up.
Oh, I see. Okay. I just thought a suggestion for like a follow-up action would be to make those calls that Kevin Martin suggested, that we maybe put on our Facebook page, or anything we send out, maybe the newsletter, to ask people to call their representative to end any kind of US support for that war in Yemen.
Excellent. Okay, I want to make sure I remember that. So the recommendations I've got so far that I haven't made note of, but this is being recorded, is to have more regular meetings like this one with focus and that are shorter. I would add to the topic of one of those meetings coming up is dealing with the military industrial complex, preparing for somebody trying to invade like Raytheon, so that people don't get caught napping. And then doing something in terms of writing our elected officials, which I'm Vicky, I don't, what good are they? To demand stopping any aggression in Yemen. And that's coupled with saying that we are going back to the table around the Iran deal. Those are two things I heard. And Ellen, you had something else?
I personally like calling better. I must make 4 or 5 phone calls to Congress almost every day. So, because I know they record those, and that I know that they tell, the rep how many calls you got on this topic.
It's true.
So,
it's absolutely true. Y'all, that is right. Calls do matter. They count those. They've done that for decades. And Rachel, I knew you had something to say. Go ahead.
I was hoping, I was very affected, I think it's by Ashley's speech. And I would like to see if we as a group could get a little more involved in reparations as a whole, and I know she said that, you know, historically, the peace groups and the people of color groups have not really jived, you know, come together on common issues. But I think reparations is about working to bring justice to centuries of discrimination and slavery and Jim Crow and so on. But we really do need to unite forces and do everything we can as white people to join with the groups that Ashley recommended.
Can I say something?
Go ahead, Ellen.
Poor People's Campaign has a Moral Monday every Monday with the topic this week coming up is how we determine the poverty measure, and then they'll talk about it, and then they'll have an action at the end of it. So that might address some of your you know what you're talking about, because the whole issue of poverty ties in with racism and everything. And Marianne Williamson, who was a presidential candidate, anyway, she has very big on reparations, and I'll try to find her her statement on it, but that was part of her platform.
Thanks, Ellen. I am so glad that Ellen Thomas is part of Peace Action. And thanks for putting the link to Moral Monday and the time as a reminder to folks in the chat there. Thursday night, we had a policy call, and they're not every week, but they're often the week before the Moral Mondays, and we get a briefing on what's going on. About half of my staff time is spent with the Poor People's Campaign work, sometimes more than half. And in the policy call Thursday, we learned that the formula that's used, the official, here's the poverty statistics formula, goes back to like 1954. And they haven't really shifted the algorithm or the formula. And often things like housing and food and healthcare don't fit the formula, and they've never made an adjustment, not through the 70s, 80s, 90s, or now. It's crazy. So the Moral Mondays are awesome, but they can also be infuriating. Just saying, especially if, you know, are in the affected communities that they're talking about. We have about 10 minutes or so left for our meeting. I want to make sure we flagged any next steps or recommendations that people have, or any follow-up. So if you do have any next step recommendations and you haven't spoken yet, and any follow-up that you'd like us to do that you haven't mentioned, please do so. Otherwise, we're going to have some music and we're going to say goodbye to each other. I have been remiss in not reminding y'all, and I should have said it when there were more people on the call, that we appreciate financial support and we need it. We do get by on a very modest budget, but that doesn't mean we don't need support. And some of the best ways to get support is a monthly or quarterly donation of $5 or $10 or $15 a month or a quarter. And if you're among the people who got a check from the feds for $1,400 and your light bill is paid and you got groceries in the refrigerator, send part of it to us. We'd love it. And send part of it to other great people doing good work, nonprofit work, because they would use it. If you can, give it all away. All right, so that's all the stuff I want to say. And Joe has his hand raised. Anyone else before we put on some music and we say goodbye? Oh, Maya will be after you, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I wanted to, I thought Chris Berg's comment was interesting for what we could do in the state or locally. And I wonder if Chris would be able to elaborate that a little bit, using the Stop Torture Now as a model.
That would be awesome. So Chris, give us some ideas and then Mia can go after you.
Well, let me jump on what Ken Jones was talking about. We do on the state level, industrial recruiting, and some of that is going to go into the military industrial complex area. And I don't know that we have much accountability on that. So that might be worth a look. And there's weird stuff always happening, like the business about no electric wind farms up in the northeast corner because of military flying zones and so on, which was so odd. We can just do better on a state level. And I think if we get a little systematic about it, we can make some difference. Thank you.
Nia?
Hey, Peace family, it is so good to hear you. I just want to interject, and this may be redundant. It is a lot of what I say, but we're talking about reparations, and sometimes you mention reparations, especially if you're an old fat old white gal talking to other fat old white people. They go, "What do you mean? It won't me?" Well, I would suggest highly that you recommend to anyone, or even better to circulate among ourselves, anything by Ta-Nehisi, that's T-A-Nahesi, Ta-Nehisi Coates, who has done over the last 10 years a brilliant body of work, culminated in his tome, The Case for Reparations. It's available everywhere, including on Kindle. But for those of us who say, yeah, we know in our heart and our gut that's right, well, this gives us a foundation, facts, statistics, history, that stands up brilliantly, and I would highly recommend any of us to take a look at either the books or the website or the YouTube for Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's brilliant, and I've used it to, I think, fairly good effect. So thank you for indulging me. I love you all, and hope to see you soon.
Great. Thanks, Mia. And thanks, y'all, for joining us, North Carolina Peace Action, this morning and setting off your day with us. I'm going to send you away with a couple of videos. You can leave whenever, you don't have to stay, but it gives you a chance to save the chat. If you don't know how to save the chat, go to where it says chat and click. And then near where your name is, near the bottom, there's a little thing that says file. If you move to the right of file, there are 3 dots. And if you click on those, one will say save chat. So if you save the chat, then you'll have all of the recommendations people put in. You'll have all of the emails and comments and whatnot. And thanks so much. We'll see you next time, and we'll be in touch.
I'd like to say that if you're looking for the chat that you have saved, it's in the documents folder. There's a Zoom folder that gets saved or opened, and it's by the date. So documents in the C drive, if you're on a computer.
Thanks, Ellen.
Sorry, I was late.
Nope, just glad to have you here. Glad to have everyone. All right, save your chat. See you next time. We'll be in touch.
Taha ua dolufa.
Hey, everybody.
With a generation of impatience, with the definition of our hatred, with the mimic hypocritic cynics seen it all, only in it for an instant, so we never call. My mama hasn't heard my voice, it's been days. Raise our minimum wage, so we never stray too far. Embrace the fake, so we never change, never grow to know who we really are. Out come the wolves, Wall Street count sheep, kings, Hollywood's Robin Hoods. We can understand what we never understood. You wanna change the world? Well, we could. You wanna change the world? Well, we could. Here we go. You wanna change the world? Well, we could.
We see government like it living and it breathing. We pay the taxes for the ceremony feeding. And we the people get everything we believe in. We fund the war, but fuck the land we really need in it. What if we love her in return the way she loved us? What if the earth was a temple and not above us? Like something every human that lived among us. Love as a mother, a daughter, a son. What? We are the one to make a difference or to see it now. Every day we make the choice of who we pay now. And if it's war that we choose, she cannot trust us. We separate from all that loved us. Yeah, we could. Hey.
You say you wanna change the world, but we could.
I know you should.
You say you wanna change the world, but we could. You say you wanna change the world, but we could.
It's all yours, so to take it. Oh, you
wanna change the world, but we could.
It seems to be something lingering deep inside. Peace, love, and unity you never seem to hide. It might as well be in really to these days. It's just this thing we call, yes, the new age. But there's no need to go ahead and run it hard. Oh, this one the thing that we got to love inside. Finally, we seen the change as well. Now we gonna save it all. We could. Oh, yes, I know.
Say you wanna change the world, but we could.
I know you should. It's deep inside.
You say you wanna change the world, but we could.
Yes, yes, should.
Alright. You say you wanna change the world, but we could.
Won't you say you should?
Hey, hey.
Inside.
You wanna change the world, but we could.
Woo.
Love it.
Ellen, that's a band called Lalani Wolf Graham.
Love
Can
it.
you put it in the
Did you
chat?
hear me?
Can you put it in
Lalani,
the chat?
Lelani, I think. I may be spelling it wrong. And
Ellen's
her
got it.
last name is Wolf Graham, Gramm. Lalani.
Graham.
It's groovy. So I'm gonna play another song, mostly for me. Y'all don't have to stay. Mostly because I love it so much. But I cry, so I'll turn my camera off. You know, it's like a prayer. What's so cool is at the end you get to howl. I know I've played it for the Peace Action Board before. I think these are women who are from the Asheville area. I could be wrong, but I think they are. I think this is an awesome thing. I use it as a meditation at least once a week.
And who is it?
Appalachia Rising.
Oh, yeah. Rising Appalachia.
They got a lot. They got a lot of us.
Rising Appalachia. Oh.
I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen. Whoa, whoa, oh, oh. 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 These times are poignant. The winds have shifted. It's all we can do to stay uplifted. Pipelines through backyards, wolves howling out front. Yeah, I got my crew, but truth is what I want. Realigned and on point, power to the peaceful, prayers to the waters, women at the center, all vessels open to give and receive. Let's see the system brought down to its knees. Whoa, whoa, oh, about it when the world comes undone. My voice feels tiny, and I'm sure so does yours. Put us all together, make a mighty I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos, uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen.
Okay.
Woo!
Wow. How
Wonderful.
many people are
Beautiful.
here?
Was that you
Okay.
screaming, George?
Maybe. I thought I was howling, but I do every time. No
Someone
one
was
ever has
yipping.
come to knock on the door at the apartment building.
I loved
Please
it.
never
That was
come.
great.
Love you, George.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, y'all, for hanging out on Saturday. Wonderful weekend.
Okay,
Oh,
we did a
to
good
have.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks. Ellen, thank you so much for all that you do.
Oh, and you
You're
too.
a consistent, reliable person, even when you're not being obvious about it. So I really appreciate that. It's rare in this world.
Well, I
Thank you.
feel exactly the same way about you. So
Oh, yay. Okay, I'll try. I'll try to keep it up. All right then. Mia, I hope your eyes are doing okay.
Well, they're not, but I'm gonna be all right. But thanks for thinking about me.
I will. I am. Take care.
I love y'all.
Okay, bye.